night the clock struck 8. Time to tune in, don't be late. Cryptid stories, tales of fright in the darkness of the night. Tune in to the stories untold within. Tune in, where the spookiest nights begin. Tune in now. Bigfoot sightings in the woods, dogmen lurking in the hoods, time slips taking you away to a different kind of day. Tune in to the shadows and the din. Oh, tune in, let the eerie tales begin. Turn the dial up, it's time for PIA radio show. Breakaway. Haunted houses by the grave, vanished ships lost to the waves, aliens and ghostly calls. In these tales we break the walls. Oh, tune in to the mysteries deep within. Reasoning, only what's it be? It's the Paranormal Intelligence Radio. Wednesday nights, enjoy the show. Crank that dial and dim the lights. It's how we spend our Wednesday nights. From the depths of the unknown, we explore the twilight zone. Spirits calling through the air. Legends rise if you dare. Shadow people in the streets, echoes of forgotten beats. Lana in sea voices, yes, ballet turning crown. Oh, tune in to the stories we unpin. Oh, tune in, where the twilight tales begin. Creepy stories we can't ignore, legends of the crypts and more.
The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with...
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. This is your host, Jack Carey, as always, and, you know, we're broadcasting from deep in the frozen wastelands of the Dakota Territories. How about that? So, if you've ever feared winter, fear it no more. I'm here to tell you you can survive minus 41 with the wind chill. It can be done. You do it with the right clothing and a car heater and all of that stuff. But stay warm out there. There's another major storm headed for the East Coast, and for people that are not that haven't moved to a place where there are few people and lots of cold, like the eastern seaboard, they're about to get hammered again, and it's not looking pretty out there. So stay warm, everybody. And as always, this week's OSCENT efforts are open source intelligence gathering that we do for the show to bring back and try to make connections that perhaps our listeners haven't thought of before. Turned up some really interesting stuff this week. As always, I'm constantly amazed at really how quickly things are speeding up in the paranormal world. It's like we're slowly approaching this place that has long rumored to exist in paranormal land, where the paranormal becomes front and center in the so-called world of reality, the world of the normies, the world of the white picket fences out there, where people don't dare to think about the monsters in the closet and the monsters under the bed and the monsters in the craft flying overhead. And in the next few months, it has been predicted by the WebBot major changes. And the WebBot is actually utilizing new forms of artificial intelligence in ways that they haven't done before over there, Cliff High and his programs. And it's producing a lot of really interesting information. And a lot of that information is it's all sort of flowing into one big river now. And we're beginning to see where the rubber hits the road with disclosure, with the whole new administration taking hold, with Elon Musk coming in and basically turning the spigots of money off to various entities, and in some cases they have no idea where that money is going because of security clearances, etc. But I'll get to that in a moment. But needless to say, that the WebBot is predicting some pretty shocking stuff to take place in the pretty near future. And a lot of this begins, believe it or not, February 26th. That's being that specific on dates. That's a day when you have a huge amount of release language take place across the world. That's usually right after a major tension event that takes place. And in this particular case, it has indications of being financial in nature. So put that down in your calendar. If you are currently engaged in any sort of major legal, contracts of any sort of, noteworthy, like, on the corporation type level, I wouldn't be so worried about, the average everyday Joe out there on the street. But on a corporate wide kind of level where contracts are being executed, there appears to be a major uproar that takes place, and a lot of that happens to be tied to the current efforts by the Doge part of the administration that's ongoing. So this is the place where you're going to begin to see, interestingly enough, by around March, Elon Musk, according to WebBot predictions, begins to sort of reach into areas of the Department of Defense, and they can see they can see money flowing. Let's put it that way, right? You can the spigot is turned on and the money's flowing and it's going down the hole, but because of security clearances and how compartmentalized all of these special access programs are that are housing alien technology, 0 point technology that could free the entire world, could end poverty worldwide, technology that has been illegally kept from especially the taxpayers of the United States who have paid for it. All of that, these spigots of money are going down right into those programs. And Elon Musk, he's about to reach in there and he's going to start turning those spigots off one by one by one. And they're going to wait and see who yells first to be able to see where that money's been going and what that's going to do. And these are predictions, like you can see the sort of evolution of these events going way back into the alter reports of the Webbot. So we're really on the cusp of a new kind of understanding of reality and a way of sort of riding the wave of Webbot predictions in the paranormal world, and watching it come true right before our eyes. This is fascinating stuff. So what that's going to do is it's going to cause all of the money and funding in these special access programs that are housing all of this alien technology to just suddenly dry up. And all of a sudden, all of the impetus to keep it a secret just dries up with it. And you're going to see a cascading of UFO information and technology just begin to come out. That's really where we are in the disclosure process. And this, like I've spoken of before, is going to be really catastrophic for a lot of people. However, even more interesting things are being predicted. So that's one thing, right? You got the whole disclosure thing. You got the breakaway civilization guys over at the Department of Defense that have siphoned off trillions of dollars in their black budget programs in order to perpetrate what appears to be an effort at creating a breakaway civilization, even to the point of creating an operational colony on Mars. All of that is about to dry up, and those people are starting to panic. But interestingly enough, all of this leads up into a point in June where the world's attentions are going to turn to the oceans. That's right, guys. There are enormous indications in the Webbot that by June, your life is going to change forever. In fact, the lives of everyone around the world are going to change forever, because the conversation at that stage, daily conversation between people, the daily news, the daily everything will be all about the alien presence in the world's oceans. Not only that, but interestingly enough, Cliff High, who controls the Webbot, is saying that there are clear indications that at some point within the 78-day period, ending June, starting at the end of June, there's a 78-day period where it appears as though a formal meeting of some kind takes place between various leaders of world governments and this alien presence living in the world's oceans. This happens on an island, and apparently the island is the island that's closest to where the aliens are located. That's all that's known, and it is known that this becomes known to the public after the fact. It's not something that's pre-announced. It happens, and then it gets leaked that it happened, and that really begins to change the worldwide narrative forever. Now, I mentioned previously that this coincides with also the populace becoming highly cognizant of the idea that there are also aliens on the moon, something which the CIA clearly has known going all the way back to their interaction with Ingo Swann. And that's something that I talked about. And so you're seeing a place where all of these what appeared in the past to be sort of disparate threads all coming together into the same vein of knowledge, the same vein of people waking up and of disclosure. And so, it's interesting because the Webbot predicts that when everybody's attention turns to the world's oceans, you have a bunch of really smart, really wealthy people out in the world who turn their resources to beginning to look for activity in the world's oceans privately, beyond the scope of governments. And when they do, they discover that there's something large moving under the waves. And by large, I mean something roughly the size of Mount Rainier, moving from ocean to ocean around the world. The Webbot doesn't know what that thing is. We can have fun and sort of theorize as to what it might be. I have the fun idea that maybe it's an underwater city, an alien city that basically travels the world's oceans, but it is detected and it becomes known. That's going to happen over the course of this next summer. So lots of fun, exciting things are taking place in our world. However, Cliff and, let's face it, Dick Algier and the future forecasting group of, these guys Algier originated with the Stargate program. And then, he's got a group of some of the world's top remote viewers all assembled in the future forecasting group. Now, that group was largely assembled in order to remote view the future price of various cryptocurrencies. It was an endeavor to use remote viewing to gain a financial edge in the cryptocurrency world. So that should be known. And there's a subscription that they sell, which is quite expensive in my view. It's $45 a month. But along with their various cryptocurrency predictions, you also get a very interesting feed of other kinds of targets that they target along the way. And some of those targets highly coincide with a lot of the Webbot predictions, like just in a really uncanny fashion. And whenever they do, I like to bring that up to my listeners, because I've discovered in the past that whenever they seem to concur with one another, there is an extremely high probability that they are both correct. And so if they are, in fact, both correct, you're going to have a period coming up here in the very short future where there's going to be a vast amount of economic turmoil taking place with what's called the spring offensive. So get ready for that. So you may have heard recently in the news that the various drug cartels have now been designated terrorist organizations. That makes them viable military targets. And because of that, the Webbot is predicting in any event that there is sort of an open warfare that begins to take place in America between agents of the cartels and our military and police, and like a really nasty kind of warfare. So that is known as was called the Spring Offensive by the Webbot, and it sort of coincides at a time when Doge is in there turning off all these spigots, and some of these spigots lead back to the so-called Antifa crowd. And when that money gets turned off, those people begin to riot in the streets. So there's a period of rioting that also takes place while all of this other stuff is going on. So Hopefully that's painting a vivid picture for you of what your next 6 months to a year are going to look like. But longer term, really sort of starting in June, it's predicted, there is an amazing sort of coming out of the darkness of new technologies, and some of those appear to be 0-point energy technologies. Now you're beginning to see the beginnings of what the Webbot 20 years ago predicted was the emergence of so-called sci-fi world for the human species. And sci-fi world will be in full motion apparently by summer of 2026. And a lot of these hidden alien back engineered technologies will by then have been recovered by the populace, and it's sort of going to lead to all kinds of new exciting futures for humanity, but also some perilous times, because let's face it, a lot of this stuff can be weaponized, and that's something that we'll always have to be leery of. Artificial intelligence alone is leading us into dangerous directions. I've been using a lot of AI lately, and I'm fascinated with it, even addicted to the use of it already, because let's face it, it makes work so much easier. It really does. It's like having a human sitting right there that is really, really smart and can do a whole lot of things if you know how to ask it the right way. And that's at this level. Just imagine once they reach a real, what they call a singularity, where, you know, AI right now can do most things better than most people. When it hits singularity, it's going to be able to do everything better than any human that ever lived. That's the stage where it really begins to take off. And that's the stage where, you know, that opens the door to sci-fi world. It opens the door to all kinds of interesting futures. But tonight, I thought we would have a great time and talk about, because I forgot to mention, our main topic is going to be the fun and frightening world of terror from the skies. I'm talking about flying cryptids. And we'll be talking about that as our main topic. But before we get to that, I wanted to mention a couple interesting articles in Paranormal in the news. There is one really interesting article out there that I encourage everyone to read. It really caught my eye, and it's being run by the U.S. Sun. It is headlined, "Americans Have the Right to Know If, quote, demonic dark aliens are among us. Donald Trump needs a UFO czar immediately," in all capitals. This is being run again by the U.S. Sun. It talks about how Mr. Nick Pope, who everybody out there should be well familiar with as being the English gentleman who ran the English version of our Department of Defense's UFO program for a number of years. And in fair disclosure, I know Nick personally, and I have appeared on his television program that is produced by Billy Carson. And I can say that he is completely sincere when he speaks. And in this article, he's basically saying that, if we get right down to it, Pope believes Americans should be told the truth. Quote, "It might be an extraterrestrial presence," he acknowledged. Quote, "but it might be something really dark. What if it's something we would call demonic? What if it's omnipotent intelligence that created humans as an experiment and it's about to pull the plug?" Now, some of you may remember that he also previously, there was a leaked conversation between him and another famous researcher. That conversation made it onto Reddit, in which he stated that he had sources telling him that perhaps the UFO phenomenon at its heart, quote, was a truth too terrible to be told. So that's interesting. I brought up the whole murder hornet scenario on his TV show about the idea that the universe is just a jungle and humanity could be like a little crying baby in the jungle, just waiting for a predator to sniff it out. And he seems to hold somewhat of a dark view, kind of like I do. I'm very leery of alien intelligence and the alien presence among us. But that's a fascinating article, and I remind everybody out there that there are a number of people behind the scenes in the Pentagon, in the Aero program, the all domain anomaly resolution office, as they call it. They change it all the time, but who believe that there is a demonic aspect to the UFO phenomenon. The Webbot doesn't seem to indicate that whatsoever. It indicates that these are, in fact, just a biological space alien, and that we are going to have to deal with the ontological repercussions of that being the truth. And that meaning that we are going to, as a species, going to have a heart-to-heart conversation with the universe, and we're going to have to figure out our true place and where our true importance lies and where do we go from here. Now, I will remind everyone that we are coming up out of the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is a dark period in human history. It comes around every so often. These travel in 26,000-year cycles. And as you come back up out of this part of the cycle where you enter a dark stage for our species, you enter into an area where we sort of clear out of the cosmic dust to a place where we can actually be bombarded. The planet and our solar system can be bombarded by our galactic center, and there are rays that come from that galactic center that interact with human biology, and when it does, it actually increases intelligence and it increases overall psychic abilities. So people over the next 6 months to a year, the Webbot is predicting will every 90 days get hit by a new wave of what it's calling psi waves. So get ready for that, guys. Get ready for the upgrade. You may feel it already. People are reporting that they're sort of beginning to think in new and unusual ways, and that could be a part of what we're seeing. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about the terror in the skies. We're going to be talking about flying cryptids. It is an interesting world, and we'll get to it. Join us.
Not on my watch, our military service members say, as they volunteer to serve. Not on my watch, they say, as they leave their families behind to keep the rest of ours safe. As they move out, stand firm, and take fire. So not on our watch, we say, to the severely ill or injured veterans who can't get the care they deserve, the therapists they need to walk again, the treatment they need to talk again, the lifetime of day-to-day help they need to live full and independent lives. When there's no more government funding, or a nursing home seems like the only option, or everyone says there's no hope for recovery, we won't leave one warrior behind. Not on our watch. Find out how you can do your part at findwwp.org.
In deep dark wood where shadows lie, Bigfoot sneaks with piercing eyes, footprints large in the silent night, a beast untamed, it's out of sight. twist in the whispering leaves. Who knows what lurks, what deceives? Lost in thought, we drift away. Different world in the light of day. Past and present blend as one. In the forest where there's no sun. Ghostly visions, they come and go. Secrets hidden we may not know. Dogman prowls, Bigfoot roams. In these woods they make their homes.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and we were discussing some really interesting stuff having to do with events about to occur and how those are all part of the current paranormal state of affairs. Let's call it that, the paranormal state of affairs. I like that. So, we're covering the idea that there are people who believe in a darker aspect to the whole UFO phenomenon, but our remote viewers and the webbot seem to infer that these are in fact just aliens, and they're going to have their own needs and wants and everything else, and that there's really no, it's sort of like shades of gray. There's not a black and white situation. But it will become known, apparently, a lot of the corruption and a lot of the money that's been siphoned off to keep all of this a secret, all of that becomes known pretty quickly. So we have that to look forward to. The Independent is running an article inside the committee that will look at the nation's biggest secrets and when you can expect to see info released. They talk about in this article the fact that a executive order was just signed that says to release the JFK assassination file, something which was predicted by the webbot and now has come true. That's huge for the UFO community because there is really a growing and already insurmountable amount of evidence that to show that JFK was in fact assassinated because he was about to give up the UFO secret and he was about to basically share our UFO findings with the Soviet Union at that time, and that's really what got him killed. But you're living in the age where I was just speaking about the Kali Yuga, and a time when we come up, we sort of pop out of the haze that sort of blocks these signals during the Kali Yuga, and when we do, we get blasted with these psychic signals, these signals that allow us extra sensory perception and all kinds of psychic abilities. And eventually that same mechanism gets to a point where it leads to another golden age, and these things occur in cycles. And so humanity has some good things coming, but it's going to be a rough little road on the way. Some stormy seas ahead. So keep that in mind. Basically looking through all of the various information that has come across over the past week. A lot of it is talking about the JFK files, the Epstein list, which is also mentioned prominently. So another thing that hits apparently the UFO phenomenon, and I think this is funny. This is a funny tie-in, really, if you think about it. is the Epstein list. So apparently the Epstein list gets released, will be released. And when it does, it implicates a bunch of shady, shadowy dudes. Let's just call them that are high executives in certain corporations who are the ones who have been hiding and back engineering various alien craft. Now, it also becomes known that some of these corporations have taken it upon themselves to down alien craft and to recover those craft by themselves. That's pretty shocking. So that's some pretty fascinating stuff. But, talking tonight, we're going to be talking about the world of flying cryptids. And the world of flying cryptids really kind of segues from the alien presence on this planet because of the ever famous, ever present Mothman. And it was the famous Jonathan A. Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, the American journalist and influential ufologist, who said, "The Mothman is a haunting reminder that there are creatures in our world that defy explanation, lurking in the shadows of our understanding." And, it's interesting because when you look into the world of flying cryptids, the Mothman is always featured prominently. And yet the Mothman sort of fits into the three circles of cryptozoology in the central circle, which is the circle of woo animals. These are the animals that are human-like to a degree that seems to defy any sort of viable biological understanding of how they might have gotten that way. And there are a number of these creatures in the cryptozoology world, and in the flying cryptid world, Mothman is sort of the king, where in the bipedal world, it would be, of course, Bigfoot. But for anyone who has read the Mothman Prophecies, you'll know that really central to the book, which wasn't included in the movie, is the sheer amount of UFO activity that was taking place in Point Pleasant at that period of time. And it's interesting because this was one of the first ongoing encounters with men in black on the ground in association with what we would today refer to as a cryptozoological creature. So that's fascinating. But there's many, many different kinds of flying cryptids, and I thought that it would be fun for a change to sort of go through some of the more interesting and lesser known flying cryptids around the world. And, the flying cryptids, they're described in folklore and mythology, but we have many, many eyewitness accounts, and they vary widely in appearance and behavior. Some flying cryptids resemble, oversized versions of known animals like the Mothman, and some are even more fantastical, type of creatures. But what they all have in common is a sincere body of eyewitnesses who claim to have truly seen what they describe. And one of these creatures is the Ahool. It's named the Ahool because that's the sound it sort of makes when it flies overhead of its prey right before it swoops down and kills you. This is mainly found in Java, in the jungles of Java. And they're said to have a wingspan rivaling the length of a small car. They're covered in gray-brown fur, and they have eyes that sort of glow red. So in a lot of cases of cryptids, and even in certain Bigfoot cases that we've had, the eyewitnesses described the cryptid animal as having glowing red eyes, and that's the case with the Ahul. Now, there is an interesting eyewitness account from a Dr. Ernest Bartel. He was a naturalist, and he was somewhat famous back in like the 1920s and 30s. He was considered to have meticulous observations, etc. And he was in the jungles of Java, and he was engaged basically going down a river in a river valley, and he stopped to marvel at the jungle's beauty around him, and he caught a fleeting glimpse of something massive overhead. And he looked up and he got to see this thing, and he said it had huge outstretched wings that seemed to be too vast for any known creature. And so he asked the local villagers what it could possibly be, and they said, well, it had to be the Ahul. And the villagers of what's called the Kampung Luar, which is located at the edge of the jungle, the Ahul is something which is actually sort of worshipped, and even kind of crosses the line into the spiritual realm. So if you're ever in the jungles of Java, beware the Ahul. But one of the more interesting and funner cryptids that I came across in our flying cryptid research over the years is the so-called snallygaster. It is the fearsome cryptid of Maryland. So Maryland has a folklore, if you will, of a local cryptid animal that appears to be somewhat like a half dragon, half bird, and it terrifies farmers. The snallygasters actually made it into numerous newspaper accounts, and it was said to possess an enormous wingspan. It had razor-sharp talons, and it had a metallic beak, which I find fascinating, but it bristling with teeth. So the beak itself had these like razor sharp teeth on them. It's really interesting because the snallygaster, when you trace its lineage, really becomes part of local folklore there in Maryland. A lot of people believe that it came along with German settlers to the area who brought with them a thing called the Schnellergeist. And the Schnellergeist means quick spirit. And over time, that became snallygaster. And there are still modern day sightings of so-called snallygaster in Maryland. So beware that crazy cryptid. And of course, we can't forget the Thunderbird. Now, the Thunderbird is something that is near and dear to Native Americans. Particularly the tribes that are off the archipelago of the northern coast of British Columbia, Canada, and to the Algonquin of northeastern North America. The Thunderbird is something that is truly revered. There are indications that the Thunderbird there is some type of bird out there, some type of undiscovered massive species that for some reason or another is brought down into the Americas because of weather patterns. And it's said that the Thunderbird rides thunderstorms as they come across the land. And there's a lot of eyewitness accounts of seeing these enormous birds the size of airplanes, flying as these storms blow through. And there are accounts like in 1890, some Arizona ranchers shot a huge leathery winged creature resembling a pterosaur. They ended up recovering the body, but the body can't be found anywhere because of the time period. It's not like they were able to preserve it. I'm sure it got buried somewhere at some point. But at the time, there were newspaper articles describing that as being possibly the Thunderbird of Native American lore. There's an account in 1977 in Lawndale, Illinois, where a young boy who was playing in his backyard was almost carried off by a gigantic bird who his mother actually saw. So not only did it pick this boy up off the ground and fly a number of feet with him, and you're talking about, I believe the boy was 10 or 11 years old. He wasn't a baby. And then the bird apparently flew up and perched on top of a tree, and the mother said that it covered the entire top of the tree. And that was in Illinois, 1977. So apparently there are these very large species of birds that are out there, and that for whatever reason, every so often make it down this far. What if they basically habitate areas like remote Alaska and places like that, only making it down into the Americas every so often? It's possible. Another interesting flying cryptid is the ropin, and the ropin is found in Papua New Guinea mainly. Now, this is a creature very much in the pterosaur realm. It's very much like a pterodactyl, except for it has a little bit of a twist. In the ropin, it is bioluminescent. So when it flies at night, it actually glows in the sky. So there has been footage taken of ropin, and it does appear to show these flying, glowing cryptid animals. I was pretty amazed by that. Now, back many years ago when I was the acting director for Crypto Four Corners, we would receive a number of calls every single year from eyewitnesses in the American Southwest who would tell us that they had in fact seen a pterosaur. They would call and say, "Hey, I just saw a pterodactyl." Interestingly enough, one of these eyewitnesses was basically a ranger for the Navajo Nation, and this lady was on patrol in a very, very remote, distant area of reservation land, and she said one of these things right at dusk flew over her truck, down in front of her truck, over the road, and its wingspan was so large that it covered both sides of the road. So do we have a breeding viable population of pterosaurs somewhere in the world? Now, even in Africa, there's a pterosaur called the Congamato, and the Congamato is another one of these prehistoric pterosaur-like creatures. It's said to have a wingspan of up to 20 feet, and the Congamato it's uncanny in its descriptions to a prehistoric pterosaur. And, this is in a place where you can imagine a creature like a pterosaur could hide and actually exist. So there were sightings actually reported in a 1923 book called In Witch-Bound Africa. that was written by a famous adventurer, and his last name was Melland. So that's very interesting. And in 1956, another sighting from an engineer working in Africa and Zambia spotted 2 of these creatures. So that's really interesting. Now, here is a very fun one that most people laugh at when they hear, which is the so-called bat squatch. So, yes, believe it or not, we have had really interesting cases where people have told us that they have seen a Bigfoot, but the Bigfoot creature possessed wings. And that's something that was even reported on Monsters and Mysteries in America on the Discovery Channel by a father and son eyewitness who claimed that one of these creatures almost took his father out of the hunting stand that they were perched in a tree. So, but a few of the others that show up in our research are the so-called spring-heeled jack from Victorian era England. The Black Flash of Provincetown was a cryptid reported in Massachusetts in 1930s. It had the ability to leap or fly over rooftops. You had the Manana Gaul, a fearsome creature from Filipino folklore, also known as the Owl Witch. You have the Mothman of Chernobyl, which has also been seen. You have the Man-Bat of Wisconsin, and that's described as a humanoid figure with bat-like wings, much like the Mothman, but really started coming in the late 2000s. It's interesting that most of those sightings have occurred in La Crosse, Wisconsin, because La Crosse, Wisconsin, I'll let you know from a paranormal investigator standpoint, is one of those places that defies explanation simply because of the sheer number of completely unrelated paranormal connections that all seem to lie in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'll give you a good example of that. Well, here's one with the Man-Bat of Wisconsin, but another would be the fact that the so-called Majestic 12 documents in ufology were leaked that made such an uproar for so many years about the 12 people that were running the UFO cover-up was postmarked La Crosse, Wisconsin. Another interesting fact is that the 2 lead detectives that investigated the, I believe, paranormal and somewhat supernatural serial killer case of the so-called smiley face killers say that that mystery too lies within La Crosse, Wisconsin. Completely unrelated to one another, but there again, all of these different connections come through in La Crosse. So I find that to be fascinating too. But in the world of flying cryptids, what can we say? There's even things like the Canby Island Monster, the flying humanoid of Mexico, and people have even seen flying snakes. So the world of flying cryptids is a much varied world in cryptozoology, and like I said before, it sort of stretches the line between humanoid-like cryptids and cryptids that could clearly just be what we would refer to as a prehistoric, if not Lazarus species, a species that may have gone extinct at once only to be somehow reborn into the ecology of the earth through a biological mechanism that we're not quite understanding. But looking for the future, to the future, forward to the future, guys, there's going to be some interesting things taking place. Keep watching the headlines, and as the days turn into weeks, turn into months, and you begin to see a lot of this stuff manifesting in front of your eyes on your TV screens. Just remember that it's not the end of the world. That wasn't predicted. And so our takeaway is that, maybe it's time. This will be a year where you can, sort of throw up your hands, sit back, watch the show. It's going to be a real whopper of a show, apparently, and do the best you can to sort of surf the wave that the cosmos has coming your way. And we're coming to the end of the show. Next week, I think what we're going to cover is Ivan T. Sanderson's underwater residence, and we're going to cover his theory about the vile vortices, the various triangles around the world where there are vast, mysterious disappearances of both people and craft. And what happens to all of those people that simply sail into these different triangles or walk into these different triangle areas and simply vanish into thin air? Are they being taken by the alien presence on this planet? Or is something even stranger happening? Are interdimensional doorways opening? Anyway, join us next week. I'm Jack Carey, and I will see you then.